Good morning and welcome to Bible Truth for Kids. Today our story is called God Takes Elijah to Heaven in a Whirlwind. Have you ever seen a whirlwind? Have you ever watched water swirl around the kitchen sink or down the bathtub drain? That's kind of like a whirlwind. This is called a dust whirlwind. So on the hot prairies or in the desert, you're going to find dust whirlwinds. Really small ones are called dust devils. They don't really do us much harm at all. But this is a much fiercer whirlwind. This is a tornado. Now Elijah and Elisha both knew that this day was the day that the Lord was going to take Elijah up to heaven, but we're not sure that they knew just how he was going to go to heaven. So as they were walking along, they were on their way to a place called Gilgal. When they got to Gilgal, Elijah said, I want you to stay here, Elisha, because the Lord is calling me to go on to Bethel today. But Elisha said, no, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to go with you. And so they traveled to Bethel. Now, when they got to Bethel, there was what we call a community of prophets there. Now, these community of prophets were sometimes called schools of prophets. They just lived in communities. They were devoted to the Lord, and they loved to study the books of the law. And they came out to talk to Elisha. And they said, did you know that today is the day that the Lord is going to take Elijah from you? And Elisha said, yes, I know that, but don't talk about it because Elijah's standing right here. Well, then Elijah said to Elisha, you know, you stay here in Bethel because the Lord has asked me to go on to Jericho. But Elisha said, no, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to leave you. And so he went with Elijah to Jericho. Now, when they got to Jericho, the school of prophets that was there, they came out and they said the same thing to Elisha. They said, did you know that today is the day that the Lord is going to take Elijah from you? Elisha said, yes, I know that, but keep quiet about it. Well, then Elijah said, the Lord has asked me to go to the river Jordan. Elisha said, I am not staying here. I'm going to go with you. And, you know, they went, but also the prophets went. They followed at a distance to see just what's going to happen here. Well, when they got to the Jordan River, Elijah took off his cloak. He rolled it up. He struck the water. And the Jordan River parted, water to the left, water to the right, and they walked through on dry ground. Now the prophets didn't walk across, they just stayed on that side, but they could see from a distance what was happening. And they saw Elijah and Elisha keep on walking and talking. Elijah said to Elisha, is there anything that I can do for you before I go? And Elisha said, yes, I want to have a double portion of your spirit. And Elijah said, well, that is a hard thing to ask, but if you see me go up to heaven, then it'll happen. But if you don't see me, God won't do it. Now, as they were walking along, suddenly chariots of horses in fire came out of the sky. And they came right between Elijah and Elisha and separated them. And then Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. This is Elisha watching. Elijah is being swept up. He's dropped his cloak. Chariots of fire up there. He just vanished. Well, Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak and he wrapped it up and he went back to the Jordan. He did the same thing that Elijah did. He struck the water and the water parted and he walked across on dry land. Now the prophets were there waiting and they said, listen, you know, they hadn't really seen what had happened. They weren't sure what had happened. They said, listen, we've got 50 men here. Let us go and look for Elijah because who knows? Maybe the Spirit of the Lord has just taken him and picked him up and put him on another mountain or down in the valley somewhere. Let us go and find him. Elisha said no. But they insisted and they kept saying, let us go, let us go, let us go. Until finally Elisha was embarrassed to keep saying no. And so he said, all right, go and look. So they went, but you know, they came back in 3 days and they said, well, yeah, we couldn't find him. And Elisha said, didn't I tell you not to go? Elisha knew that Elijah had gone straight to heaven. So Elisha stayed in Jericho for a while. And some of the men of the city came to Elisha and they said, the water in this city is really bad. It's polluted. Our crops won't grow and people are getting really sick from it. So Elisha said, bring me a new bowl and put some salt in it. And so they did. And they brought it to Elisha, and he took that salt and he threw it into the water. And the Lord restored that water. It was perfectly pure and clean. Elisha's ministry is going to be one of compassion and miracles. After a little bit, Elisha left Jericho. He went back to Bethel. But on his way back to Bethel, there was a group of boys, probably 13, 15-year-old boys. They came out, just a pack of them, and they started jeering at Elisha. They started saying, hey, you bald-headed prophet, why don't you just vanish like Elijah? Yeah, baldy, they cried, you're so bald, you're a useless prophet. Well, Elisha turned around and he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out and mauled 42 of the boys. They didn't kill them, but they injured them badly. It was a serious thing to disrespect a prophet of the Lord. And we need to remember too that we need to respect the servants of the Lord, people like pastors and teachers. We should always be respectful to them. The Lord expects that of us. Now let's look at our map here. Up here in Israel, we know that King Ahab has died. His son, King Joram, was evil and disobedient, much like his father. And down here in Moab is Mesha. He is the king of Moab. Now when Ahab was alive, he required that Mesha, the king of Moab, pay him a tribute every year of 100,000 sheep and wool from 100,000 rams. That is a lot. And so when King Ahab died, King of Moab said, I'm not doing that anymore. Well, when King Joram heard that, he was furious. And he went down here to Judah and he said to King Jehoshaphat, listen, will you come and fight with me against the king of Moab? Because he's rebelling against me. And Jehoshaphat said, yes, I will. And they also got the king of Edom to join them. So 3 kings are going to come against Moab. So they went this way. They went from Israel. They're coming down through Judah, going to go up here and attack them this way. But it's a wilderness down here. And after 7 days, they had no water for themselves, no water for their animals. King Joram said, oh, is this it? Has the Lord brought us 3 kings together just to hand us over to the Moabites? But Jehoshaphat said, well, is there a prophet of the Lord around here that we could inquire of? And one of Joram's servants said, well, Elisha's in this area. And so they went and they got Elijah. But when Elisha came, he said to King Joram, what? Why didn't you just consult the prophets of your father Ahab and Jezebel? Why should I have anything to do with you? And then he said, but if it wasn't for King Jehoshaphat here, who is a righteous and good king, I wouldn't even look at you. Then he said, bring me a musician. Bring me someone who can play the harp. And so they did. Music is so calming, isn't it? And Elisha, he sat and listened to the harpist. And as he was playing, the word of the Lord came to Elisha. And this is what he said. This is what the Lord says. You are to dig trenches and ditches, because tomorrow, without wind or rain, no storm, the Lord will fill up those ditches and trenches with water. And he said, this is an easy thing for the Lord to do. He will also give you the Moabites into your hand. Well, so they did that, and that night there was no storm. There wasn't a drop of rain, but in the morning when they woke up, the trenches and the ditches were full of water. Now the Moabites had heard that these 3 kings were coming against them, and so they were getting ready, and they got up early in the morning. And when they looked out, this is what they saw. The water looked It was just the sun reflecting on the water that made it look like that. But the Moabites thought the Israelites have killed each other. They've killed each other. Look at the water. It's full of blood. Why, we can just go and take all the plunder and spoil and treasures that are left behind. Let's go. And so they did. But it was not blood in the water. It was only a reflection. And when they got to the Israelite camp, the Israelites just rose up and fought them fiercely. God can do anything. Those things were easy for the Lord to do. You know, unusual things, miraculous things that we think are so hard are not for God. So next week we are going to see Elisha's miracles. He's going to do some amazing miracles, and people from all different backgrounds are going to realize how much God cares for them.